Violence that does not stop. The rise of Miguel Ángel Treviño Morales, known as Z-40,
Yo creo que la violencia no se va a acabar.
does not begin with an explosion of violence, but within a system where violence already exists as a controlled instrument, applied selectively to enforce agreements, eliminate rivals, and maintain balance, operating within a structure that, while brutal, remains contained enough to allow criminal economies to function without constant disruption, creating an environment in which violence is present, but not yet continuous. For decades, cartels in Mexico rely on this model, where violence appears in moments of conflict and recedes once control is re-established, allowing trafficking networks, corruption systems, and informal governance structures to operate with a degree of predictability, yet that predictability begins to shift as the system itself evolves, not through sudden escalation, but through gradual change in how violence is applied and sustained. By the late 2000s, the role of violence expands beyond reaction and begins to take on a more permanent function. And once that shift begins, it does not return to its previous state, because systems that adapt toward continuity rarely revert back to limitation. Unlike many early members of Los Zetas, who emerge from military backgrounds within specialized units such as the Grupo Aeromóvil de Fuerzas Especiales, Treviño's entry point develops within the environment of Nuevo Laredo, a border city defined by continuous movement, where goods, people, and narcotics pass through constantly, and where control depends less on static territory and more on the ability to manage flow without interruption. His early roles place him at the operational edges of trafficking networks, handling enforcement and coordination tasks that require adaptability, allowing him to integrate into a structure that is itself evolving as Los Zetas begin transforming violence from a reactive tool into something more structured, influenced by discipline, hierarchy, and consistency, creating a system in which violence can be applied not only when needed, but when expected. Within that system, he does not introduce violence as something new, but learns how it functions at scale, recognizing that its effectiveness depends less on intensity and more on consistency, and that once consistency is established across territory, behavior begins to adjust without requiring constant intervention. Under earlier cartel models, violence remains episodic, triggered by specific events such as territorial disputes or failed agreements, and once those events are resolved, the system stabilizes, allowing operations to continue with limited disruption. Yet under Treviño's influence, that pattern begins to dissolve, as violence transitions from reaction into condition, shaping behavior continuously rather than intermittently. In territories influenced by this model, economic and social activity does not stop, but adapts, as businesses incorporate extortion into operating costs. Migrants move through controlled pathways, and local officials operate within implicit constraints, not because enforcement is always visible, but because its consequences are understood and assumed. Violence no longer interrupts the system, it regulates it. And once violence becomes regulation, it no longer needs to be constantly demonstrated to remain effective. This transformation allows Los Zetas to expand beyond traditional drug trafficking, diversifying into kidnapping networks, fuel theft, extortion, and control of human smuggling routes, each activity requiring enforcement that must remain consistent enough to sustain authority across regions while visible enough to reinforce it, creating a structure in which economic activity and coercion become increasingly interconnected. As these systems expand, the distinction between voluntary participation and forced compliance becomes less clear, because both operate within the same framework, where violence ensures continuity rather than disruption, embedding itself into daily life without requiring constant escalation. The system grows, but as it grows, the demands placed on it increase, and increased demand begins to generate pressure that cannot be ignored. The split in 2010 between Los Zetas and the Gulf Cartel intensifies this pressure, as open warfare spreads across northeastern Mexico. extending beyond trafficking corridors into urban and rural environments simultaneously, creating conditions in which territorial control expands into entire regions rather than remaining confined to strategic routes. Within this environment, conflict is no longer an isolated event, but a continuous condition where roadblocks appear without warning until daily life begins to operate within the presence of violence rather than outside of it. Such as the mass killings in San Fernando, Tamaulipas, where dozens of migrants are killed in 2010 and mass graves are discovered in 2011, signaling that movement outside established control carries immediate consequence. This form of communication does not rely on negotiation or policy, but on visibility, ensuring that behavior adjusts without requiring constant repetition, because once a message is understood, it does not need to be continuously delivered. Yet even this form of control begins to generate pressure. By 2012, following the death of Heriberto Lascano, Treviño assumes leadership of Los Zetas at a point when the organization has reached significant geographic expansion, operating across multiple states through decentralized cells that maintain local authority while remaining connected to a broader structure, leading to variations in discipline, autonomy among regional commanders, and inconsistencies in how violence is applied. What was once centralized begins to fragment, and fragmentation introduces instability that cannot be fully contained. Unlike figures such as Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, Treviño does not cultivate a public image, avoiding interviews and visibility, relying instead on internal authority derived from consistency, where leadership is measured by the ability to maintain operational order rather than public recognition, reinforcing a system in which reliability replaces visibility as the primary source of control. This absence of narrative strengthens the system because it reduces exposure while maintaining authority, ensuring that operations continue without requiring attention. Despite its reach, the system contains inherent limits because continuous enforcement requires sustained coordination, resources, and communication, all of which become increasingly difficult to maintain under growing pressure from federal operations, intelligence efforts, and targeted interventions, creating conditions in which internal fractures begin to emerge. Regional factions operate more independently, alliances shift, and discipline weakens. In July 2013, Mexican Marines captured Treviño Morales near the border in Tamaulipas without large-scale confrontation, removing a central figure from the system without immediately disrupting its operations as leadership transitions to Omar Treviño Morales. Yet the removal does not resolve the instability that has already formed. Instead, it accelerates it, because the system was already under pressure, and once pressure exceeds coordination, control cannot be restored to its previous state. Los Zetas fragment into smaller groups, some retaining the name, others forming new identities, and some aligning with rival organizations, creating a landscape where control is no longer centralized but distributed across competing factions, allowing the structure to persist while losing cohesion. Violence continues, but it becomes less predictable, spreading across regions without the same level of coordination, reinforcing the conditions that the system itself created. Treviño's legacy is not defined by duration or territory, but by transformation, as violence shifts from a strategic tool into a systemic mechanism that operates continuously across economic, social, and territorial dimensions, altering how organized crime functions beyond his own organization. Treviño does not invent violence. He normalizes its continuity. And once violence becomes continuous, it no longer depends on specific events to justify its presence, because it becomes part of the system itself. He is captured. The organization fragments, but the structure does not disappear, because systems built on continuous enforcement do not end when leadership is removed. They persist, they adapt, and they continue, Because once violence defines order, it is no longer temporary, it becomes permanent.